Hey everyone, and welcome back to the Deep Dive. Today, we're tackling something that's pretty crucial for anyone prepping for the UPSC. Especially the mains and prelims. Land acquisition.
Big one.
Yeah, how does the state's power to acquire land? How does that work with individual rights? We're going deep on this today.
It's a good one.
Yeah, it's based on a recent Indian Express article.
Okay.
So get ready for global perspective,
Right.
some insights from the U.S., South Africa, and of course we'll take a close look at India
Right.
and how India's legal landscape,
The laws are changing, right?
exactly,
Yeah,
it's evolving.
Yeah.
Yeah, so this is one of those topics I think that can seem pretty straightforward at first,
Yeah.
but then when you really start to think about the history and the legal side of things and even the ethical dimensions,
Right. There's a lot to unpack there.
it gets really complex.
For sure.
That's where we come in, right?
That's right.
We're going to unpack it all for you. So to understand this, we really need to go back in time.
Okay.
I'm talking way back to 1625,
Wow.
to Hugo Grotius. He was a Dutch legal scholar.
Okay.
And he was the one who really put forward this idea of eminent domain.
Uh-huh.
And it's basically the idea that a sovereign,
Right.
they can take private property for public necessity.
Hmm.
So, it's fascinating how this idea really took root and spread, becoming a foundational principle
Yeah.
in so many legal systems across the world.
Right. Even today, you see.
Even today.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah.
We see the echoes of his theory in how countries are trying to figure out this whole balance, public needs and private property rights.
Yeah.
But this term public necessity,
Yeah.
it seems kind of broad, doesn't it?
Who decides that?
Who decides that?
Yeah,
Exactly. And what happens when
Yeah.
individual rights
Right.
clash with that definition?
Right. That's the question.
That's the whole issue.
Yeah.
This tension between what the state needs
Yeah.
to acquire land for projects that benefit society
Everyone, yeah.
as a
yeah.
whole
Uh-huh.
versus, the individual
Yeah.
and their right to own their own property and protect it.
This is where it gets interesting for UPSC, too.
This is where it gets really interesting because there's no one-size-fits-all answer.
No.
Different countries have different approaches.
Right. They've tried different things.
Yeah. How do they strike that balance? Let's start with the UK.
Okay. Good place to start.
We can't talk about property rights without talking about the Magna Carta.
No, that's a big one, the Magna Carta.
Right. It's a landmark document
Yeah.
in the whole history of property rights.
1215.
1215.
Yeah.
It put a major check on the king's power
Right.
to just take land whenever he wanted.
He couldn't just do whatever he wanted anymore.
Exactly. It established this principle that even the monarch
Had to follow the law.
has to follow the law. It's the rule of law.
Right.
It's a key element of that.
Huge shift.
That was a huge shift back then.
It really was.
I mean, to go from a king taking what he wants
Right.
to him having to follow the law,
Totally.
that's a major change.
Yeah.
So fascinating. Now, hopping over to the United States,
Okay.
they have this thing called the Fifth Amendment,
Right.
which basically says no taking private property without just compensation.
Right.
So it seems pretty straightforward, right?
Yeah, on the surface, sure.
Yeah. But I bet there's more to it.
But the devil's in the details.
Yeah.
How do you define just compensation?
Exactly.
And what does public use really mean?
Yeah.
That's where the debate gets heated.
Oh, okay.
There's this case, Kilo v. City of New London,
Okay.
landmark case,
Yeah.
shook things up.
What happened?
Supreme Court ruled that the government could actually take private property, even for private development,
Really?
if it served a broader public purpose.
So what? Give me an example.
Like economic revitalization.
Oh.
So yeah, even taking land for private development could be public use in some cases.
So wait, the government could take someone's home to build a shopping mall
Yeah, potentially.
just because it might help the economy?
The idea was that it would benefit the public in the long run.
That seems controversial.
It was incredibly controversial.
I bet.
Kalo case sparked protests across the country.
Wow.
People were really concerned about the government having too much power
Yeah, I can see why.
and that it could be used to benefit private interests.
Right, at the expense of individual homeowners.
Yeah, exactly.
So how does the U.S. respond to all this pushback?
Well, many states actually passed laws to restrict the government's power.
Okay.
They made it harder to take private property for those kinds of economic development reasons.
Uh-huh.
They put in stricter definitions of public use.
So even in a country with, this long history of property rights,
Yeah.
you still have this struggle to define
Yeah, where's the line?
where the line. Exactly. When it comes to eminent domain,
It's a tough one.
it really highlights how complex it can be to balance, those individual rights
Yeah.
with what the community needs.
Yeah, what's good for everyone.
Right, exactly.
And it's not just the U.S. facing this.
Oh, I'm sure.
Take South Africa, for example.
Okay.
Their constitution specifically talks about property rights.
Okay.
Article 25.
Yeah.
No one can be arbitrarily deprived of their property.
Okay.
But it also allows for expropriation.
Expropriation. So that's like the government taking property.
Basically, yeah.
Okay.
But there are conditions.
Like what?
It has to be for a public purpose.
Okay.
And they have to pay just compensation.
So we're seeing some similar themes here.
Right.
Public purpose, just compensation.
It keeps coming up.
These seem to be kind of like recurring principles in how countries are approaching this whole issue.
Yeah. Different contexts, but similar ideas.
But let's bring it home now
Okay.
to India.
Yeah, let's get into it.
All right, for our UPSC folks,
This is where it gets real.
this is where we get into the nitty-gritty.
Yeah, the details.
Because India has such a long and complex history
Oh, yeah. Centuries of legal development.
with land acquisition rights.
It's a long story.
And to understand all of this,
It's crucial,
it's crucial for anyone who wants to do well
especially for mains.
on those UPSC mains exams.
Yeah,
right?
they need to know this stuff.
So let's dive into it. Take us through, how have property rights evolved in India?
Okay, so initially, property rights in India,
Yeah.
they were actually considered a fundamental right.
A fundamental right.
He was right there in Article 19 of the Constitution.
Mm-hmm.
And then it was further protected by Article 31,
Okay.
which basically said no one could be deprived of their property without compensation.
Okay.
But then things changed, big time, with the 44th Amendment in 1978.
Hold on. They took away a fundamental right.
Yeah.
That's a pretty big deal. What was the reasoning behind that?
It was a big shift, for
Yeah.
sure.
Yeah.
So the argument was if you give property rights the same status as other fundamental rights, like, freedom of speech
Right.
or religion,
Yeah.
it could actually hinder land reforms and development projects
Interesting.
aimed at benefiting a larger part of society.
So they were thinking about the greater good.
Yeah, especially the poor and marginalized.
Okay.
So with the 44th Amendment,
Yeah.
the right to property got moved
Moved where?
from Part 3, which is fundamental rights,
Okay.
to Part 12 of the Constitution.
Okay.
And it became a legal right under Article 300A.
So it's still a right,
Yeah.
but not a fundamental one.
Exactly.
And that's a really important distinction, right?
Huge difference, especially for UPSC.
Especially for our UPSC folks out there.
They need to understand that.
Understanding the implications of that shift,
Yeah,
that's got to be key for those mains exams.
for sure.
So it's important to understand how this played out in the context of land acquisition laws in India.
Yeah, how did things actually work on the ground?
Exactly. So walk us through it.
Okay.
How did land acquisition work in India before this change?
So for a long time, the main law that everyone used
Yeah.
was the Land Acquisition Act of 1894.
1894.
Yeah, it gave the government the power to acquire land for public purposes,
Okay.
as long as they paid compensation to the landowners.
That seems reasonable.
Yeah, it made sense at the time.
So what were the problems with it?
Well, it worked for a while, but over time, people
Yeah.
started to see that it had some serious flaws.
Okay, like what?
It was very focused on the individual landowner,
Okay.
and it didn't really consider the wider impact
Mhm.
of taking that land.
On like communities?
Yeah, on communities, livelihoods, the social and economic side of things.
So it's kind of a narrow view then.
Yeah, it didn't really take into account all the consequences.
Like displacement.
Displacement, disruption, potential loss of livelihood.
Especially for people who really depend on that land.
Exactly, the vulnerable communities.
So how did India address those concerns?
Well, there were more and more calls for a different approach.
Right.
Something more comprehensive
Yeah.
that considered everyone's rights.
More rights-based.
Exactly.
Okay.
And that's where the 2013 Act comes in.
The 2013 Act.
Yeah, big changes.
I heard a lot about this.
It's a turning point for sure.
Yeah, it's considered a major turning point. Right?
Yeah, a real game changer.
Okay, so the 2013 Act seems like a pretty big deal.
It is.
And I bet our UPSC listeners,
Yeah, they should be paying attention.
they're all ears right now because this is pure gold.
This is the stuff they need to know.
This is it.
Yeah.
For mains prep, understanding this act,
Uh-huh.
the reasons behind it, its impact.
Yeah, all important.
So let's dig a little deeper into this landmark legislation when we come back
Sounds good.
after a short break. Don't go anywhere.
We'll be right back.
Welcome back, everyone. We're about to dive into the 2013 Land Acquisition Act.
Oh yeah, this one's big.
Yeah, a real game changer in how India approaches, this whole balancing act,
It really is.
development
Yeah,
needs, and the rights of individuals and communities.
absolutely. It tries to make the whole land acquisition process
Yeah.
more transparent, more fair,
Okay.
and, really sensitive to the needs of the people who are actually affected by it.
So one of the things I've heard a lot about with this act is the social impact assessment.
Yeah, the SIA.
The SIA, it seems like it's a big part of this new approach.
It's a cornerstone of the 2013 Act, yeah.
Can you explain that for us? What is that exactly?
So basically, it's a really detailed study
Look.
that looks at what might happen to the communities
Uh-huh.
when land is acquired for a project.
Okay.
And it goes way beyond just the economic impact.
So it's not just about, like, the market value of the land.
No, not just that.
Yeah.
It looks at all kinds of things, like how people's livelihoods will be affected.
Right.
Will they still have access to resources like water, forests? What about the social and cultural side of things?
Yeah.
Even potential environmental damage.
So it's really trying to get the full picture
Yeah, the whole picture.
of how a project could impact people's lives,
Not just their wallets, exactly.
not just their wallets.
Well, it's a big change in how we think about development.
Yeah.
It's recognizing that development can have a cost.
Uh-huh.
And that cost shouldn't just be paid by the people who lose their land.
Right, that makes sense.
Yeah.
This SIA, it sounds pretty complex.
It is a complex process for sure.
Who's involved in actually doing it?
So you've got government agencies, of course,
Yeah.
but also independent experts, people from different fields.
Okay.
Sociology, economics, environmental science.
They bring in the experts.
Yeah, and importantly, the
Yeah.
communities themselves.
Oh, okay.
The people who will be affected.
That's a big change, right?
It's about making sure everyone has a say.
Yeah, it seems like the 2013 Act is really trying to make land acquisition more participatory.
More democratic, exactly.
Or democratic.
And it's not just about having your voice heard.
Okay.
The Act also sets out clear rules for how you figure out compensation. It's not just about the market value of the land anymore.
Right.
It takes into account things like potential loss of income,
Okay.
relocation costs,
Yeah.
even the social and cultural value of the land.
So it's about making sure people are compensated for everything they're losing,
Yeah, the whole package.
not just the land itself.
Right.
Okay, so it goes beyond just compensation then.
It does.
What else does it do?
There's a big emphasis on rehabilitation and resettlement.
Okay.
That means providing support to people who have to move,
Yeah.
helping them find new homes, new jobs, new
Found it.
opportunities.
So it's really trying to make sure people aren't left worse off.
Yeah, that they have a chance to rebuild their lives.
Right.
It's more human-centered, for sure.
Yeah, more human-centered,
Yeah.
more focused on making sure people are okay.
That's the goal.
After all this,
It's not just about the bottom line. It's
Yeah.
about people.
this 2013 Act is really fascinating.
It's a big shift.
It seems like we're seeing a real shift in India's development model,
I think you're right.
moving away from just focusing on the economics
Yeah,
to something that takes into account,
the human side of things.
the social and human costs.
It's about balance.
Right.
Finding that balance between growth and justice.
This is all great in theory,
Sure.
but I imagine putting it into practice
Yeah.
across a country as big and diverse as India,
Right.
it must be really challenging.
Oh, it has been. There have definitely been challenges.
Yeah, what kind of challenges?
Sometimes the SIA process hasn't been as thorough as it should be or as participatory.
Yeah,
And there were always concerns about bureaucracy,
right.
political influence,
Yeah.
and whether local administrations really have what it takes to carry out these complex assessments and programs.
So it's not a perfect system.
No system is perfect, but it's a step in the right direction.
Okay.
It's a framework for a more just approach to land acquisition, but it
Right.
really depends on how well it's implemented.
Right.
And if everyone involved is committed to making it work,
Yeah.
that's why it's so important to look at real world cases.
Oh, okay.
See how it's actually playing out.
Right. The successes, the challenges.
Exactly.
Let's get into some of those real world examples.
All right, let's do it.
I'm ready for some legal drama.
Okay, so imagine a highway project
Okay.
in a rural part of India.
Okay.
The goal is to improve connectivity, boost the economy,
Right. Progress.
but to do that, they need to acquire land
And
from farming communities.
Classic dilemma, right?
Yeah,
Progress versus people's livelihoods.
it's a tough one.
How did the 2013 Act come into play in this situation?
This is where the SIA was really crucial.
Okay.
Because it brought to light some serious concerns
Like what?
about the impact on the farmers. It showed that they might lose fertile land
Right.
Their irrigation systems could be disrupted.
Uh-huh.
And there were social and cultural impacts, too.
Right. These are close-knit communities.
Oh, exactly.
So it was about much more than just the land itself.
It was about their whole way of life.
Right.
The SIA revealed all these interconnected issues
Yeah.
that went way beyond just the money.
So what happened next?
Because of what the SIA found,
Yeah.
the developers had to come up with better plans
Okay.
for compensation and rehabilitation.
Yeah.
They had to actually work with the communities
Okay.
to find solutions that worked for
So
everyone.
it was more collaborative.
Much more collaborative.
Okay.
It wasn't just the government telling people what to do.
Right.
It was about bringing everyone to the table
Oh.
and finding common ground.
I like that.
And in this case, it actually led to a good outcome.
Oh, good.
The highway project went ahead,
Okay.
but it was done in a way that minimized the negative impacts and gave the communities the support they needed.
Sounds like a win-win.
Yeah, development moved forward,
Uh-huh.
but it was done in a way that was sensitive to the needs of the people
Right.
and the environment.
This is a great example of how the 2013 Act can actually work.
It shows that it's possible
Yeah.
to balance those different interests.
But I'm sure not all cases are this smooth.
Oh, definitely not. There have been cases where the SIA process wasn't done well.
Okay.
It was rushed or people didn't really have a say.
Right.
And it's always a challenge to actually deliver on those promises.
Yeah, the compensation, the rehabilitation.
Exactly. It's an ongoing process for sure.
It's a work in progress.
It is.
This is such an important topic
It really is.
for understanding development in India.
Yeah, how do we grow?
Right. How do we grow,
Yeah.
but also be fair?
Exactly. It's about finding that balance
Yeah.
between economic growth and social justice.
I'm curious to hear your thoughts on where we go from here.
Yeah, what's next?
What does the future hold for land acquisition in India?
That's the big question, isn't it?
It is.
It's something policymakers and legal experts are thinking about a lot right now.
I bet.
India is developing so fast.
Yeah.
The need for land is only going to grow.
So how do we make sure that happens the right way?
Right. How do we acquire land efficiently,
Yeah,
but still protect people's rights?
exactly. So let's delve into those future challenges
Right.
and some potential solutions
Let's do it.
when we come back after a quick break. So we're back, and we were talking about how, as India keeps developing,
Yeah.
the demand for land is just going to keep increasing.
It's inevitable, right? As the population grows, the economy expands.
Right.
We're going to need more land for all sorts of things.
Like what? What kinds of things?
Infrastructure, roads, railways, airports,
Okay.
industrial development,
Mhm.
and of course, urbanization, more and more people moving to cities.
So with all of that, how do we make sure that all this development happens in a way that's actually progressive
Right.
and respects people's rights?
That's the million-dollar question, isn't it? Well, I think, first of all,
Yeah.
we've got to make sure that 2013 Act is really working the way it should.
Yeah. How do we do that?
The social impact assessment process, the
Yeah.
SIA,
Right.
it has to be truly thorough,
Right.
transparent, everyone can see what's happening,
Uh-huh.
and participatory. The people who are going to be affected,
Right.
they need to have a real voice in the process.
Because it's not just about, checking boxes.
No, it's about genuinely listening to people's concerns.
Right.
And actually addressing those concerns.
It seems like building trust is really important here.
Oh, absolutely. If people feel like they're being listened to,
Yeah.
that their rights are respected,
Uh-huh.
they're much more likely to cooperate.
Right. It's about working together, not just telling people what's going to happen.
Exactly. It's a partnership.
And it goes beyond just the process, right?
Oh, for sure.
What about the compensation?
Yeah, the compensation and the rehabilitation measures,
Uh-huh.
they have to be adequate,
Okay.
and they actually have to be delivered.
Right. It's one thing to promise things.
Yeah, promises aren't enough.
It's another to actually follow through.
People need real support.
Yeah.
If they're losing their land, they need viable alternatives.
So is it about finding them new land?
Sometimes, yeah.
Okay.
Sometimes it's about helping them find new jobs or giving them the financial support to start over.
Right. It's about giving them the tools to rebuild their lives.
Exactly. Empowerment, not just displacement.
I like that.
It's about helping people move forward.
Are there ways to maybe minimize displacement in the first place?
That's a great question, and I think it's something we need to be thinking more about.
Yeah.
Can we be more innovative with how we approach development?
Like how?
Well, think about cities, for example.
Okay.
Instead of always expanding outwards,
Right.
can we build upwards?
Vertical expansion.
Exactly. Make better use of the space we already have.
Okay, that makes sense.
And what about land that's already been degraded?
Right.
Can we reclaim that land for development projects?
Instead of taking more land from people.
Exactly. It's about minimizing the impact.
So we need to be more creative.
We need to think outside the box, yeah.
And it's not just about the government, right?
No, the private sector has a huge role to play too.
Companies, yeah.
Companies that are acquiring land,
Uh-huh.
they need to go beyond just following the law.
Okay.
They need to be proactive.
So it's not just about ticking boxes.
No, it's about taking responsibility
Right.
for their impact on people and communities.
It's a collective effort then,
It is. Everyone needs to be a part of the solution.
including, of course, our future civil servants.
The ones who are going to be shaping policies and implementing these laws.
Exactly. Which brings us back to our UPSC aspirants.
That's right.
I hope this deep dive has given you a good understanding
Yeah, a solid
of
foundation.
this really complex issue.
It's not simple, but it's important.
It is important. And remember, for those mains exams,
Yeah.
you're going to need to go beyond just the basics.
The nuances, the debates, the case studies,
Exactly. Don't just memorize facts. Try to really understand the why.
the underlying principles, the challenges,
The challenges, yeah.
and the potential solutions.
And don't forget those prelims MCQs.
Oh, yeah, those can be tricky.
Right, you might get questions about the history of land acquisition laws in India.
Or the key parts of the 2013 Act.
Exactly, so be prepared.
Study hard.
This deep dive has been packed with information, but I'm sure it's also sparked some more questions for you.
I hope so.
That's what we want. We want you thinking critically.
Engage with the material.
Head over to the comment section. Let us know what you're thinking.
What stood out to you?
What questions do you still have?
We love hearing from you.
Share your insights. Let's keep this conversation going.
And if you found this deep dive helpful,
Hit that like button
subscribe to the channel.
and ring that notification bell so you don't miss any future episodes.
We're here to support you on your UPSC journey.
Until next time, keep those brains buzzing and those ambitions soaring. Source, i.e.,